We're going to do something today that I think that anytime we talk about the Exodus, um, we don't do. We do ask some important questions, and people try to prove the biblical Exodus. We take what the Exodus, the text says about the Exodus, and we swallow it as a whole. And then what we do is we try to go to Egypt, we try to go to the walls of Egypt um, to prove that the Exodus did happen. But if we read the biblical text and its narrative about the Exodus, is this something that we can prove? Can we prove any of this? And if we go on the journey to prove it, is it based on evidence and logical reasoning? Or is it usually solely based on personal religious beliefs? Majority of the time, it's based on personal religious beliefs. It's not based on logical reasoning or evidence. Majority of the time, even if we come across some evidence, the interpretation is also personal religious beliefs because we come to the table believing that 2 million people left out of Egypt, believing that there were all these miracles, signs, and wonders, and then we try to read that in interpreting what the evidence has. So I'm going to ask a different question, a question that most people don't ask, a question that challenges almost all the videos that you've watched that seems to try to prove an exodus on YouTube, in the Hebrew Israelite community, in the Christian community, in the Jewish community, you name it. The question that nobody asks is, how did 2 million people vanish without a trace? I would ask again. I'm not concerned about what is on the walls of Egypt. I'm not concerned about miracles, the signs, the plagues. I'm not concerned about that. I'm not concerned about the splitting of the Red Sea. The question that I am asking is, how do you have 2 million people walk through a place for 40 years and they leave nothing behind? How does 2 million people vanish without a trace? Is that a fair question? Or am I out of my medullas?
Fair question.
Correct. We would all want to know. We have the technology, we have archaeology, they've dug stuff, they've found stuff, stuff that the Bible mentions. They've gone to the places and they've found evidence, material evidence, primary sources. But the most pivotal event when it comes to the Abrahamic religions, we have found nothing. 2 million people vanished into thin air. How is that possible? Where are we getting the numbers from? We read in Exodus 1. These are the numbers of the Israelites according to their fathers' houses. The total number of legions of the camps was 603,550. So according to the text, these were just um, the people mentioned here are just men of probably fighting age. So, according to the text, approximately 2 million individuals left Egypt, consisting of 603,550 adult male Israelites, in addition to women and children. This is where the numbers, the 2 million, is coming from. Is this number accurate? If this account of 2 million people is inaccurate, it begs the question of how such a significant numerical error could have been made in the Bible's record. If it's not 2 million, if it's maybe less than that, it begs that we ask this question. There are those who argue that the historical accuracy of the Exodus is inconsequential, as its significance rather lies in its enduring importance to religion throughout history. It's not its accuracy that we're looking for, they argue. While that is a pleasant sentiment, I have personally begun to find it unconvincing. In the past, yes, I would entertain that. But if we are trying to be critical, it's not convincing. Because let's be honest, we are driven to know whether the events described actually occurred or if the beliefs held for centuries are nothing more than a fabrication. We want to know. So, whether or not the Exodus happened is of tremendous significance to countless individuals, which cannot just be overlooked. It seems the numbers have been massaged a bit. Well, I won't say a bit, drastically. The number of people that left out of Egypt, the numbers has been massaged drastically. Okay. That is what I hold to, and I'm going to prove that. If that is the case, what drove these authors to tell the story in this manner? The writers of the Exodus account intended for it to be viewed as an integral part of their the nation's history. And for thousands of years, countless individuals have treated it as such. And I'm asking, what drove these authors to tell the story in this manner? What were they trying to convey about their world at the time that they were telling the story, writing the story as they were writing it? Suppose we engage in a thorough historical examination of the text, and then we discover that only, let's see, only a portion left out of Egypt, let's say about 20% or 10% of the narrative is rooted in reality, in history. How would you take that? How would you feel? Or what if we determine that it is entirely fictitious? What implications would this have on how we view the account and its significance? I believe these are essential questions to consider when evaluating the historical veracity of the Exodus story. Now, I'm not the only one who have done the research, have studied, and come to the conclusions that I have come to. You know, we have scholars saying almost the same thing. In this book, From Eden to Exile, Unraveling Mysteries of the Bible, on page 90, this is what it states. We do not have a single shred of evidence to date. There is nothing available archaeologically to attest to anything from the biblical story. We're talking about the Exodus. No plagues, no pattern of the Red Sea, no manna from heaven, no wandering for 40 years. However, I should add that there is also no archaeological evidence that proves it did not take place. So I'm not just making things up. I'm not just drunk with wine since it's a Passover festivity and I'm just saying these things. No, my conclusions has been from years of studying and research. Okay, so these are the questions that scholars have asked. We are asking the same questions. We need answers, not religious ones, not dogma. Okay. When it comes to questioning the validity of the Exodus, people often focus on the numbers. It's not what's on the walls of Egypt, it's not the plagues trying to, because there's nothing there. Okay. For example, archaeology cannot prove the miraculous. So when you say that manna fell from heaven, how do archaeology prove that? So, no. The real question here is the numbers. They highlight the fact that there is no archaeological evidence of 2 million people in the Sinai region or a widespread material culture of Egypt in early Israel, such as Egyptian pottery, pottery, or architecture. Additionally, no records have been found in Egypt of a massive group of Israelite slaves, very specific, or a significant exodus. And like I always make sure that I say, it's important to also note that this lack of evidence does not necessarily dispel the possibility of the Exodus happening altogether. We don't have the evidence that we need based on the narrative that the Bible gives us. But does it mean that the Exodus did not happen? No, we cannot conclude that. What can we conclude? The scale of the Exodus may not have been as large as people have traditionally believed. That is the conclusion of most scholars. Majority of the scholars have now come to this conclusion. Is there a historical background to the Exodus? Of course. Did 2 million people leave out of Egypt? No. So the argument is not, did the Exodus happen? There's a history behind it. The argument is that the Exodus, even if it happened, was on a very small scale, not as traditionally believed as 2 million people. No chance. Now, if we are being critical, is archaeological work necessary to confirm that a mass exodus of 2 million people presents some challenges? I don't think so. We don't need archaeology to tell us that because it's been long calculated for some time that if the people were marching, let's say 8 across, and they're going to Mount Sinai, once the first group arrived at Mount Sinai, half the people would still be in Egypt. if you're looking at 2 million people. This was long calculated. There was a bishop called Bishop Colenso. He crunched the numbers 150 years ago and figured out that much waste such a large group of people would produce in the Sinai over a 40-year period will be so huge. His calculation suggested that the Sinai wilderness should be teeming with life, life meaning that with evidence. So finding nothing in the Sinai to verify the Exodus may not come as a surprise because long ago we knew that there was something wrong with the numbers. So I'm taking the approach because I'm doing textual evidence. I'm just going to read the text based on the tools that we have, we know, and see what is going on. This absence of artifacts does not necessarily disprove the Exodus, but it casts doubt on whether it was a massive event as traditionally believed. That is all that the doubt is about. 2 million people could not disappear without a trace. It's hard to imagine such a massive number of individuals vanishing into thin air. But if we assume that this did not happen as narrated in the biblical text, like I am concluding, then who would invent such a claim? And for what purpose? If numbers play a significant role in the argument, then we shouldn't just ask why someone would fabricate an exodus, but also why would they be specific to give us such a huge number, millions of persons? Why would they do that? So archaeology has not been able to find these people. So now let's turn our focus back to the text, our biggest source, our biggest evidence, and look if we can find some textual evidence. How can we use textual evidence to determine who made the exodus from Egypt? Let's explore how textual evidence can give us a more complete picture of who made the exodus from Egypt. That is the goal today. Scholars generally agree, again, that the Exodus, as depicted in the Bible, is not supported by historical events or evidence, sorry. However, there is a widely held consensus among scholars that the biblical narrative contains some historical truth. Specifically, most scholars appear or agree that, a group of settlers from Egypt likely migrated to the highlands, meaning that they went into the northern part, or they went into, let's say, Israel. Correct, Israel. Okay, so I'll say it again, and then I'll say my premise, and then I'll prove it or give data to it. Scholars generally agree that the Exodus, as depicted in the Bible, is not supported by historical evidence. That is 100% accurate. However, there is a widely held consensus among scholars that the biblical narrative contains some historical truth. That is also 100% accurate. Specifically, most scholars agree that a group of settlers from Egypt likely migrated to the highlands. That is true. And that is what I'm going to prove in this session. What is my premise? It appears that the group that departed from Egypt eventually became known as the Levites, meaning that It's only the Levites who were in Egypt, and it's only the Levites that experienced an exodus. That is what I am set to prove today. We're going to do textual analysis. We're going to use our sources, source criticism. What do we have from the text itself? We know that poetry and songs were the first forms of literature to be composed by humans, predating prose by thousands of years. We know that. No one would argue this. The reason for this could be that poetry and songs are comparatively easier to remember, a fact that held significant importance in a world where writing was a challenging task and literacy was relatively scarce. So people used songs and poetry to capture ideas, to, let's say, record history. Hence, the majority of early writings that have managed to survive are in the form of poetry and songs. If you want a good reading material, you should look at this book, Studies in Ancient Yahwistic Poetry. So, I'm chasing after poetry and songs, okay? Because from our biblical text, those are our earliest primary sources, our earliest documents. Now, the Song of the Sea, which is also known as the Song of Miriam in scholarship, and the Song of Deborah, both of which are part of a collection of ancient songs, are regarded as the two oldest surviving texts in the Bible. These songs were likely composed during the time period when the events they depict took place. These early Hebrew texts are referenced in other datable texts, providing further evidence of their authenticity. So we are on solid ground, to say the least. Now, while my intended point is separate, what I'm going to do is separate, it is worth noting that the two earliest biblical texts are attributed to women figures, which is Miriam and Deborah. A fact that even in the present day era, where gender issues are a central concern, is often inadequately acknowledged. Could we call these two the first biblical historians? Possibly. But just wanted you to pay attention that our earliest biblical texts, they are attributed to these two women. Okay. The Song of the Sea and then the Song of Miriam. Our earliest source for the Exodus is the Song of Miriam. Amongst the earliest pieces of literature that relate to the event of the Exodus is the Song of Miriam, also known as the Song of the Sea. It is perhaps the earliest record we possess that portrays the direct aftermath of the event. If we want a source that tells us what happened, which was composed between 6 months to a year of the happenings, it is this song. It is believed that people sang this song within a year or so, if not less, of the actual incident, making it an incredibly compelling primary source of information. Again, I'm just appealing to the text because archaeology has not been able to help us. So we're looking at the Song of Miriam, our earliest primary source of an exodus out of Egypt. I'm going to read this song and I want you to listen carefully whilst you read along because it is telling what took place. I want you to observe what is missing. There's a lot there, but what is missing that you would have wanted to appear in the song? I'll come back and then would answer that question. So I'm going to read Exodus 15, the Song of Miriam. I will sing to Yahweh, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver he has hurled into the sea. Yah is my strength and might. He is become my deliverance. This is my God, and I will enshrine him, the God of my father's house, and I will exalt him. Yahweh, the warrior, Yahweh is his name. Pharaoh's chariot and his army he has cast into the sea, and the pick of his officers are drowned in the sea of reeds. The deeps covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, Yahweh, glorious in power. Your right hand, Yahweh, shatters the foe. In your great triumph, you break your opponents. You send forth your fury. It consumes them like straw. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The flood stood straight like a wall. The deeps froze in the heart of the sea. The foe said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will bear my sword, my hand shall subdue them. You made your wind blow, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the majestic waters. Who is like you, Yahweh, among the celestials or among the mighty? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders? You put out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your love, you led the people, you redeemed. In your strength, you guide them in your holy abode. The peoples hear, they tremble. Agony grips the dwellers in Philistia. Now are the clans of Edom dismayed. The tribes of Moab trembling grips them. All the dwellers in Canaan are aghast. Terror and dread descend upon them. Through the might of your arm, they are still as stone. Yet your people cross over, Yahweh, till your people cross, whom you have ransomed. You will bring them and plant them in your own mountain, the place you made to dwell in, Yahweh, the sanctuary, your throne's platform, which your hands established. Yahweh will reign forever and ever. This is the song at the sea, the song of Miriam. Was there anything you would have wanted to see here in this song that you did not? Is there anything that stood out?
Rabbi,
Yes, sir.
was there anything about slavery in there for real?
Negative. I did not, I don't recollect reading anything about slavery. No.
Yeah, oh, yeah, well, that's what it's kind of like a main topic about the Exodus, also, kind of.
Correct. Yes, definitely. Any others, please? Let's contribute.
Shabbat Shalom. I think this is, women and men talk very differently. And when we come through something and we're on the other side of something, we say things differently. Women pray differently. So when women, uh, they go to talking, ooh, you should have seen what happened. And this is why I did it. And it did like this, and it went like this, and then poof, and then it went pow, and then it. So I think this is a lot of woman talk. This is how a woman would describe something that went on that was, powerful or majestic or out of the ordinary. You explain it a with a sort of glib. It doesn't have a lot of detail so much, but it does have a lot of. You won't believe this. This is incredible. This is unbelievable. This is, and I think that's how it is that women describe things, how we talk about things, and women understand that. When I understand her prayer, I mean her song or her prose or her rap or whatever this is, but I don't see where he talked about, whoa, we free, whoa, we got away from them horrible demons, and whoa, it was horrible over there. None of that's discussed. She didn't discuss any of that. And I'm so happy that my legacy is free and all my grandchildren gonna be free and all that. She didn't say any of that. So that's the part that's missing to me. But all the dramatics, it's in there.
Let's see. Madam Adrian in the chat says that um, I didn't hear anything about the plagues. That's correct. Plagues are not mentioned. Yep. Mr. Yeziyahu says the count of people. Yes, we didn't hear anything about numbers. How many people were rescued? We didn't hear anything about that. Okay.
This was it also is presenting Yahweh as a warrior deity. It's about
Awesome.
him going to war against the Egyptian army. It doesn't say anything of entailing about the story or plagues or Passover or nothing. None of that's mentioned here.
Awesome.
And how the other nations around are so scared because he's a, you know what I'm saying? He's this great warrior, and all he did was beat them up. You know what I'm saying? It's just a totally
Correct.
different story. It just looked like, like our God just came. You know what I mean? It really doesn't even. It's almost like a rescue, but not like a salve. You know what I mean? It just,
Correct.
it's different. It's just very different. If we being critical.
Correct. That's what we require. Mr. CJ says nothing about tribes. That is accurate. So, as we've demonstrated, we see that the song clearly omits exact numerical figures. The original source material of the incident fails to indicate the size of the group that ultimately arrived at the Red Sea. Okay. Similarly, the text never specifies that the group passed through walls of water, nor does it provide sufficient detail about what occurred with the people. Where the water is parted, there's dry land, and then they walk through. The song doesn't say anything of that sort or of that nature. However, what is evident is that the Egyptians who were pursuing them encountered some form of calamity at the sea, but we don't have the details. Okay, I think the most telling, the most important that we would all want to see is not in the song. The Song of the Sea never mentions the word Israel. I repeat that again. The song never mentions the word Israel. It never identified the people as Israelites or even Hebrews. Instead, The text merely refers to the departure of a group of people, in Hebrew, an arm, from Egypt. This is critical. The group, number 4, that was the primary recipient of divine intervention, who were protected from the chasing chariots, is identified solely as the people of Yahweh. They are not referred to as Israel in the text. And the text or the poem suggests that Yahweh did not lead the group or this people, the group of the people of Yahweh, to the entirety of that land. So you see what we want to see that we don't see from our earliest source. Where did he bring them? Exodus 15. In your love, you led the people you redeemed. In your strength, you guide them to your holy abode. You will bring them and plant them in your own mountain, the place you made to dwell in, Yahweh, the sanctuary, your throne's platform, which your hands established. Where is this?
Wait, I ain't set that in a GPS. We need to.
Where could this be?
But is that supposed to be Sinai because they mentioned a mountain? You know what I mean?
Okay, that is why scholars
Because
suggest that the phrase, this place, can refer to various locations: Mount Sinai, Gilgal, or Shiloh. But we know it's talking about Mount Sinai because that's where he brings them to. That is where the leader Moshe met this deity and then came to Egypt. So he's bringing them to his sanctuary, his mountain. This is what we get from the song. So, according to the text narrative, a group of people referred to as an arm, a people, it can be an army, left Egypt in what is commonly known as the Exodus. After their departure, they eventually became part of the priestly rank and were in the service of the God known as Yahweh. Their habitation was at a location that belonged to this deity. This is our first earliest source of the Exodus. I think it's quite telling what we don't have in there and what we have in there. And like I've said in previous classes, this is the Shasu of Yahweh. The Shasu of Yahweh. Those who left Egypt and went to the Sinai desert, where they meet this deity Yahweh. And they are the ones that introduce Yahweh into the northern part of where? Into northern Israel, the northern kingdom. So now I'm using the text to demonstrate that this is actually so. Okay, let's go to the Song of Deborah. The Song of Deborah, an ancient poem that appears in the book of Judges, is distinct from the Song of the Sea and has no connection to the Exodus event. It has no connection, so why am I bringing it here? We'll see. The song, background, believed to have been composed in the 12th or 11th century BCE, commemorates the momentous battle in which the tribes of Israel came together to win an important victory over the Canaanite army led by the powerful Hazor, king of Hazor. His name was Sisera, General Sisera. This momentous battle was believed to mark the establishment of Israelite dominance as a unified people. It is this battle that the territorial entities rallied together to go and fight. And they rallied around El to go fight. Israel. Okay. The song credits Deborah, who rallied the tribes with the help of her commander Barak, with unifying the different tribal factions. Now, the song lists the 10 tribes of Israel that Deborah called to arms and pays homage to each by name, with one notable omission. Let's find who was omitted. Judges 5. I'm not going to read this. It's not as smooth as the song by the sea, but I want to point out those that were mentioned. We have Ephraim mentioned. So Ephraim showed up. We have Benjamin mentioned. We have Micaiah mentioned. That would be Manasseh. We have Zebulun mentioned. We have Issachar mentioned. We have Reuben mentioned. We have Gilead mentioned. That would be Gad. We have Dan mentioned. We have Asher mentioned. We have Naphtali mentioned. So when we do the count, we get 10 tribal factions coming together to form what we know as the Northern Kingdom, rallied together to fight. Who is missing in this tribal list?
Judah and Levi?
Why don't we consider Judah in this case?
But they weren't. Remember, Judah is not a part of northern Israel at this
Beautiful.
time.
Correct. Judah is not part of the north. Judah is known as the southern kingdom. The north is the northern kingdom of Israel, and then the southern kingdom of Judah. Two different entities. So we will not mention Judah. Who is missing?
Levi is mentioned as well.
Levi is missing, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Levi is missing as well.
Correct. Levi is not here.
What about Simeon? Like Miss
Simeon
Martin.
is southern. So
Gotcha.
Simeon is south with the southern kingdom of Judah. So we have the 10 tribes that make up the north mentioned, but one person is not included, and we say is Levi. Why is that? It's a question that we must ask. Why is Levi not mentioned here as a tribe? Put that in your spirit. So what do we see from our two earliest sources, primary sources? This is what we see. The Song of Miriam, which takes place in Egypt, does not mention Israel. The Song of Deborah, which is set in Israel, does not make any reference to the Levites. Our two sources. The Song of Miriam doesn't mention Israel. The Song of Deborah doesn't mention the Levites.
It's because when this group of Levites was coming out of Egypt, the Israelites were already in Canaan. These
Beautiful.
Levites.
The Song of Deborah is happening in Israel. These people never left Israel. They were never in Egypt. They've been there for however long you want to put them there. So when they rally, There are no Levites. There are no tribe called Levites to join them. The tribes in the northern, what became the northern kingdom, rallied together to go fight. Well, those that were in Egypt, in their songs, they have no reason to mention Israel. They don't know Israel. They're not Israelites. They are not identified as Israelites. The people in Israel were not worshiping Yahweh. They did not know Yahweh. They worshiped El. So you see how we've arranged the setting of the Exodus. The Israelites in the land have no clue of any Exodus. Two distinct people experiencing two distinct things. That is why in my submission I said it appears that the group that departed from Egypt eventually became known as the Levites. They became known as the Levites. They were not Levites. They were the Shasu of Yahweh, or the people of Yahweh. And it's only them who were in Egypt, and it's only them who experienced an Exodus. You say, Rabbi, you making this up. Well, that is why that individuals with Egyptian names are exclusively found among the Levites. It's worth noting that. Names like Hophni, Hall, two Phinehas's, Merira, Mushi, Pashhur, Aaron, and most notably Moshe. They are all Egyptian names. What is interesting is that not a single individual from the rest of Israel has an Egyptian name in the Bible. Not one. The only people with Egyptian names are the Levites. Why is that? I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. I'm going to go to Exodus 31, and you tell me how I get out of this supposed contradiction. Look at Exodus 31. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moshe, saying, See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uriah, the son of Hor, of the tribe of Judah. I just said that there is no Israelite with an Egyptian name. It's only the Levites. And then I gave you some names, and Hor, H-U-R, is one of them. And then I come to Exodus 31, and then I read that there was actually someone called Hor from the tribe of Judah. Does it contradict my statement?
No, Rabbi, it doesn't. It doesn't. The
Why
reason
does it not?
reason why you said Israel, Judah,
Beautiful.
Judah's not Israel.
It's not Israel. Never forget this distinction. It's extremely important. When the Levites arrived in the region, Judah existed as an independent entity from Israel. So this person who gets the name Hor gets the name after the Levites had come in, and then Yahweh has made its way into the south. In northern Israel, there is no other name that is Egyptian, only the name that we see from the Levite group. They were the ones in Egypt. They were the only ones that were in Egypt. They were the only ones who have an Exodus narrative. It's quite interesting that the authors themselves did not realize that the names of the Levites were Egyptian. Let me repeat that again. I am saying that the Levites, their names are Egyptian. Okay. The writer, the priestly writer who was writing years later, did not even realize that the names were Egyptian. Why do I say that? Exodus 2, we are told of a narrative. And a man of the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi. Let's pause there. You see how the text is specific. The people who were in Egypt, I'm saying they are the Levites, or they were those that became the Levites. And the text is focusing on just the Levites here in this Moshe narrative. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw him that he was good, she hid him for 3 months. When she could no longer hide him, she took for him a reed basket, smeared it with clay and pitch, placed the child into it, and put it into the marsh at the Nile's edge. His sister stood far from afar to know, what would be done to him. Pharaoh's daughter went down to bathe to the Nile, and her maidens were walking along the Nile. And she saw the basket in the midst of the marsh, and she sent her maidservant, and she took it. She opened it, and she saw him, the child, and behold, he was a weeping lad. And she had compassion on him, and she said, "This is one of the children of the Hebrews." His sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call for you a wet nurse from the Hebrew women, so that she shall nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. The child grew up, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became like a son. She named him Moshe, Moses. And she said, "For I drew him from the water." So named him Moshe, coming from the root Masha, to draw. Instead of assigning an Egyptian name to the hero in the narrative, the author portrays the name Moshe as Hebrew, which means that the story suggests that the princess of Egypt possesses exceptional language skills, allowing her to come up with Hebrew-based etymologies for names. That's far-fetched. I doubt that really happened. But the person writing is trying to make the name Moshe Hebrew. It's not a Hebrew name. No. Why did she call him Moses? We would answer, wrongly, because she drew him out of the water. That was the interpretation for many years. But what language did Pharaoh's daughter speak? Not Hebrew. She's the one given the name. She spoke Egyptian. So we would expect an Egyptian woman calling a baby Moshe to give an explanation fitting the meaning of that word in Egyptian, not in Hebrew. But instead, the author makes her explanation play on the meaning of the word in Hebrew. But Moshe is an Egyptian name, is not a Hebraic name, so we cannot use Semitic cognates, or we cannot conjugate the name based on Hebrew rules of grammar. We cannot do that. Most people did this till we discovered the Rosetta Stone. And when the Rosetta Stone was discovered, the consonantal string MSS that we find in Moshe's name, we came to find out meant child, just as we have in Ramses. Ramses has the same consonantal string, MSS. Ramses means that son or child of Ra. So Moshe means child or son in Egyptian language, whatever they spoke. You see that in the text. The child grew up, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became like her son. So what does she call him? Moshe. That's Hebrew. Moses, meaning my son or my child. That is the Egyptian name that he has. This is why I'm saying that in the whole of the biblical text, the Egyptian names are assigned to the Levites. No other person in Israel has an Egyptian name.
I got a quick question, Rabbi.
Okay.
Um, so we're saying that um, this group were the Levites, right? And so my initial question, of course, is, and let's just say it was a handful left, correct? Are you saying that Yahweh was in Egypt, or are you saying that during their migration they came into contact with some people who were worshipers of Yahweh, and they picked up that religion? And when the North started moving south, they ran into that group of people. That's where I am right now. They didn't leave Egypt as Yahweh's people. They must have met someone along the way that made them Yahweh's people, or when they went into Egypt, they were Yahweh's people. Is there any information that you can shed on that?
Yes, very profound question. So, that is an interesting one because two priestly sources tell us two different accounts.
Mm,
The E source tells us that they encountered Yahweh at Sinai. The P source puts Yahweh in Egypt. So, two Levite authors giving us two different accounts.
Rabbi?
yep. And what do you hold to?
Oh, the P source is later, is late. I hold to the E source. The P source is so. The reason why the person who is writing this makes Moshe a Hebrew name, Exodus 2, is the P source. He's so removed from the happenings that he is thinking that this is actually a Hebrew name. So, if you should ask me which Levitical group I would go with in regards to what they wrote about the Exodus, I would go with the E source, where the deity is encountered at um, the Median territory in Sinai.
Very good. Thank you very much.
And like you said, it was this group that actually brought, they were not Levite, they were not called Levites yet. I'm using Levite as an anachronism because we know them, they became the Levites. But the group of Yahweh, the people of Yahweh who came out of Egypt, were the ones who, when they got into the land of Israel, became the Levites. If Levite means to attach, to attach. So they attached themselves to Israel. That's the name, Levite.
And just one last question on this. When Israel began its southerly expansion, did they absorb Median?
Did they? No, they did not. No, they did not. There
Okay,
was
great.
some tension, though.
Oh,
and it's a priestly tension. So I would explain when I explain the priestly groups in the we're going to get there right now. You would
okay.
see the tension between the the priests, those who became the Levites.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So yes, there was an Exodus. So we're not disproving the Exodus. We're saying the Exodus happened, but not as it's told. And we're using the text to actually prove our case that the text never said that 2 million people left. Our earlier sources doesn't say that. Our earlier sources have the people of Yahweh experiencing an Exodus, and then these are the same people that came in contact with the northern kingdom who introduced Yahweh to the northern kingdom. And they are the only ones with a desert experience. No one else in Israel has this desert experience but the Levites. And I think I can prove, I think I can prove that further. See what happens in the book of Deuteronomy. Moshe's blessing to the people before his death. So, when someone is going to die and they pronounce a blessing, we should be particular about what the person says. What does Moshe tell us? And this is the blessing with which Moshe, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel just before his death. He said, Yahweh came from Sinai and shone forth from Seir, the territory of Edom, the south. You see, this is quite telling. He came from someplace. He wasn't with you guys initially. Coming from Moshe's or whoever is putting on the lips of Moshe. So Yahweh came from Sinai. That is the Shasu people, the people of Yahweh that I said they experienced the Exodus. They brought him and shone forth from Seir to them. He appeared from Mount Paran and came with some of the holy myriads. From his right hand was a fiery law for them. Indeed, you shown love for peoples. All his holy ones are in your hand, for they let themselves be centered at your feet, bearing your utterances. The Torah that Moshe commanded us is a legacy for the congregation of Jacob. And he was king in Jeshurun. Whenever the sum total of the people were gathered and the tribes of Israel were together. What do you notice about verses 5, what I have highlighted? Are there two groups mentioned or one group?
See no
Whenever
Judah
the
here. Oh, I'm sorry.
correct. Whenever the sum total of the people were gathered and the tribes of Israel were gathered, two or one group?
Two.
Two, correct?
Two.
You have the people and then you have the tribes of Israel. Who are the people?
The
Ah.
Shasu.
Correct. In the song of Miriam, they are called the people, the arm. So Moshe is distinguishing the two people. What is he come to do? He's going to give them tribal territories. So we have the arm, the people gathered, and then you have the tribes, and they're going to become one. He goes from tribe to tribe, and he tells us something about the tribes. Should I read all? Let's see. May Reuben live and not die, and may his people be counted in the number. May this also be for Judah. And he, Moshe, said, O Yahweh, hearken to Judah's voice and bring him to his people. May his hand do battle for him, and may you be a help against his adversaries. And then he goes to Benjamin. And of Benjamin he said, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, or Yahweh, beloved one, shall dwell securely beside him. He protects him all day long, and he dwells between his shoulders. And then he comes to Joseph, a long one. And of Joseph he said, his land shall be blessed by Yahweh with the sweetness of the heavens with dew, and with the deep that lies below, and with the sweetness of the produce of the sun, and with the sweetness of the moon's yield, and with the crops of early mountains, and with the sweetness of perennial hills, and with the sweetness of the land and its fullness, and through the contentment of the one who dwells in the thorn bush. May it come upon Joseph's head and upon the crown of the one separated from his brother. To his firstborn ox is given glory. His horns are the horns of Raim. With them he would, that's a goat, with them he will gall people together throughout all the ends of the earth. These are the myriads of Ephraim, and these are the thousands of Manasseh. No? Do you know why Joseph is so long? We'll answer that later. And to Zebulun he said, so we have Zebulun, rejoice, Zebulun, in your departure, and Issachar in your tents. And of Gad he said, blessed is he who grants expanse to God. He dwells like a lion, tearing the arm of his prey together with the head. He saw the first portion for himself, because there the portion of the lawgiver is hidden. And he came at the head of the people. He did what is righteous for the Lord, and what is lawful with Israel. And of Dan he said, Dan is a young lion streaming from Bashan. So just general stuff. And of Naphtali, he said, Naphtali is favorably satisfied and full of Yahweh's blessing, possess the sea and the south. And of Asher, he said, may Asher be blessed with sons. He will be pleasing to his brothers and immerse his foot in oil. So these are the other tribes that he speaks about. My focus is the tribe of Levi. Pay attention and tell me what is different. And of Levi he said, your Thummim and Urim belong to your pious man, whom you tested at Massa and whom you tried at the waters of Meribah. Does that tell you something?
Is that Egypt?
Correct. You're right there. Where is Massa? Where is Meribah? We
On the
know.
road to Canaan.
Ah, in the wilderness. Why does Moshe not mention anything about the wilderness with the other tribes? Nothing.
He doesn't know.
Of all the tribal
Because they didn't
oracles,
have that experience.
correct.
It wouldn't have made any sense to them.
No. But the moment he gets to the Levi, he puts them in the desert.
Right. So he plucking heartstrings with every tribe right now. And that wouldn't have made nobody feel nothing but the Levites who came from that way.
Yep. Let's continue. It's quite telling. You tested our Massa and whom you tried at the waters of Meribah. This is in the desert. They had a desert, a wilderness experience because they left out of Egypt. Who said of his father and his mother, I do not see him? Neither did he recognize his brothers, nor did he know his children. for they observed your word and kept your covenant. Now listen to what he's saying. They shall teach your ordinance to Jacob and your Torah to Israel. Pause. Why is it that these people are the ones to teach Yahweh to Israel?
They were the only ones
They
that
the
They got the
ones who
knowledge.
knew Yahweh.
because
They knew
Israel's
him from
God
the
was
desert.
El.
They,
Go ahead. You're all correct. Madam Masis, I didn't hear your part.
I just said because they knew him in the desert.
Yeah.
They knew him. They knew his ways.
You met this deity at Sinai in Midian, and you brought this deity to Israel. You know him. We don't. You are his priests. You serve him. You give him food to eat. You wash his feet, whatever priests do. So you shall teach the ordinance, the Torah teachings of this deity to those who have been in the land their whole life. They've never left. Okay, the book of Deuteronomy is the one writing. Who is Jacob and who is Israel here? He says, you shall teach your ordinances to Jacob and your Torah to Israel.
Is it northern and
Who?
southern?
Correct. But who is who? Who is Jacob? And
Oh,
then
Israel is
who?
Israel, right? And Jacob is the southern, right?
Look at it
No?
again.
Oh man.
Before I asked the question, I said it's in the book of Deuteronomy. So that plays a role in the answer.
Jacob is the
Who?
northern kingdom, right?
Correct.
Yeah, because that's them taking the identity again, huh?
Correct. Because at this time, that's why I said Deuteronomy is the one writing, the D source. So at this time now, Israel has become a name that the South has taken, and now they are calling the North Jacob as a trickster, however they want to put it. So that's why I said is the book of Deuteronomy. So that should impact or affect the answer that we should give. So
It just
they
be
shall,
them simple word flips, man,
I know, right?
you know,
They shall teach your ordinances to Jacob and your Torah to Israel. They shall place incense before you and burnt offering upon your altar. Look at verse 11. May Yahweh bless his army. Army? Why are they called his army?
is it a flex?
Is it just me? Is it just mean am? Is it just
Correct?
that?
Why is that important? Correct. So, Madam Pamela, you get in there. Is it a legitimate title? Let me put it that way, since you mentioned the arm. Is it a legitimate title?
Yes, it is legitimate because they were the first and only, right? They were Yahweh's people.
Where do we
I'm,
find the
I'm,
arm? The arm mentioned first.
and I don't want to say medium. I want to say coming out of on the way from Egypt to medium. How about that? I don't want to place them somewhere because they
When
seem to be
we
a
go,
nomadic people.
good,
It's the lawyer and me.
good. When we read the song of Miriam,
Miriam, yeah, I was about to say an old girl song. She say that
correct?
stuff.
Yes, these people fought out of Egypt. If you go back, read the song, you know, there's actually a battle. There is actually a fight, and they leave out. So Moshe is saying that may Yah bless his army because the Israelites are not his army. These guys are the ones who fought out of Israel. This is why The J source tells a story about what happened at Shechem. Who were the two people who ransacked Shechem? Who was the in the book of Genesis? Who was the leader of what they did with the people of Shechem when they asked them to circumcise? Was it not Levi?
Oh, right. Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Yes, because
And
that's
Simeon. And
correct.
Simeon. Yes.
Levi and Simeon. Levi is the one who is the head. They said, Levi, you should have been blah blah blah, but because you did this because you and Simeon bound it together, but he was the one in charge. He was the older one. So the J source knows that, yeah, these guys are very feisty, they don't play, but why? Because of their experience in Egypt, based on the song of Miriam. So Moshe calling them Yahweh's army is exactly what they were in that song. They were the only ones who fought out of Egypt. They were the only ones who had this experience. So I'm adding more receipts to my position that it's only the Levites who came out of Egypt. It's only the Levites who have a wilderness experience, and it's only the Levites who worshipped Yahweh and they introduced Yahweh into Israel.
Man,
So,
Rabbi,
yes, sir.
I heard a brother say that the Levites were samurais, man.
I don't blame him. It could be true. Actually, I agree. Because we would when we continue doing this, you would see they come in with no land, and the Levites don't play. You got to give them something. We see how they went about it. You see. So, of all the tribal oracles, this is the only one that has a direct connection to the wilderness wandering when Moshe was speaking his last words. If we are to accept the authenticity and age of this oracle, we know we're talking about the book of Deuteronomy, you know how they behave. It demonstrates that a particular group that was involved in the Exodus and wilderness wandering was acknowledged with tribal status. Here, they get tribal status. However, it seems that they did not receive a corresponding territorial allocation. They are tribes, but they have no land.
Rabbi,
So now let's look at our evidence. Our evidence collated so far highlights that the Levites were recognized as an integral part of the tribe of Israel. However, unlike the other tribes mentioned in the songs of Deborah, their association with the journey from Egypt to Israel is explicit. Their unique role in this event is made clear, while no other group of Israelites is mentioned in this context. No tribe of the north, including the south, eventually had a wilderness experience. They were not in Egypt as slaves. They never left Egypt as slaves. They had been in the land of Canaan. The land of Canaan was a province of Egypt. They didn't have to leave there to be under Egyptian authority. But this group who became the Levites. They were in Egypt. They left out of Egypt. They had this wilderness experience. These primary sources provide ample evidence that only the Levites share a direct bond with the Exodus event. This is the conclusion when we look at our primary sources.
And Rabbi, when we say the P source, is it fair to say that that doesn't necessarily mean the Levite source. It means the priests
The
that were
priestly group source. Yes.
right.
Yes. Okay. So with that question, let me go into this documentary hypothesis. I'm going to just do a quick summary of it to give more clarification to what you just said. So we are using the text as our main point, and we're using it critically. We're not just reading it and accepting it. So it's a textual analysis of the Exodus. If we're doing a textual analysis, then we should know about the documentary hypothesis. We've done this before, but for those who would listen on YouTube, they may not know. So let me give a summary, a brief summary of it. Now, the documentary hypothesis is the most widely cited interpretation of the textual evidence surrounding the Bible. Despite some people suggesting that it has a diminished consensus, which is true, or has been disproved, which is false, it, it's, how should I put it? The lack of consensus. If people argue that the consensus has diminished, of course it is. I would agree with that. But the lack of consensus among Bible scholars is not exclusive to the documentary hypothesis. It applies to all hypotheses. So this is not new. In other words, no single hypothesis has a clear majority of support among biblical scholars. So the fact that the consensus has diminished doesn't nullify it or make it wrong. No. What happened is that it diminished and people came up with their own hypotheses, with this being the basis of it, the foundation of it. So, what is this documentary hypothesis? What is it saying? The foundation of it is that the documentary hypothesis is based on the proposition that editors, or who we'll call redactors, compiled the Hebrew Bible from numerous source texts. That is the basis of it. Moses did not write it. Anyone who says Moses wrote the text is giving you traditional answers or religious answers. Moses did not write these texts. Okay. Now, this theory is supported by a majority of scholars outside of orthodox or fundamentalist communities. But even in recent times, these orthodox and fundamentalist, I always cannot pronounce this word, communities, they are beginning to accept that yes, there are a lot of hands in writing this biblical text that we have now. So things are changing. People are coming to terms that Moses did not write this thing. Okay. But there is now a wide variety of variations. Like I said, people said it's diminished. It is diminished, but now there's so many variations, different hypotheses. We have supplementary hypotheses that imply authors wrote documents to supplement existing ones. There are hypotheses that suggest that some documents were composed later in Israel's history, so the dating is different. There are hypotheses that propose different order of these texts. So even though it's diminished, now you have a boatload of hypotheses. Why? They've come to the same realization. There are sources behind this book. It's not written by Moshe. Okay. So this is just the foundation of what this hypothesis is. What do we know? One, these are the facts on the ground. The Pentateuch, or the 5 books of Moses, is composed of 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These works were sourced from 4 main documents, with some supplementary ones included. These texts were skillfully combined by editors, who are often called redactors, to form the present structure of the 5 books. This is how the book that we have in our hands came to be. Now, the documentary sources of the Pentateuch are denoted by letters. We have the J, the Yahweh. We have the E, the Elohist or Elohim. We have the P, which will be the priestly source. And then we have the D, which is Deuteronomy, Deuteronomistic source. Okay, like I already said in past classes, the letter J refers to Yahweh's name, which is known from the start of the story at creation. When you look at the J source, you will notice that the name Yahweh is used from the beginning. Let me ask this question. Who was the first person to use the name Yahweh? The first character to actually use the name Yahweh? Who knows? Take a wild guess.
It was
The
Abraham, wasn't
serpent.
it?
Again, sorry?
The
I think
serpent.
Negative.
I think it was Moses.
Was it
Negative.
Abraham?
Negative. In the J source. So in the book of Genesis, who is the first character to use this name?
I said, wasn't it Abraham? Wasn't it?
No.
Are you talking about
Oh, I
Genesis
thought it was
2?
him. And
Pharaoh.
Gene- No. Yes, Genesis 2.
Was the first time the name was mentioned? It's a priestly source. It says Yahweh Elohim.
No, like the first character to use the name.
Oh, the first character. Noah.
No.
Cain.
Was one of the
No.
brothers? Oh, well,
No.
Adam.
No.
oh, just
Oh,
tell us, man.
Eve,
Just tell us.
Eve, Eve.
Eve is
I've
the
gained a
first
son.
Eve.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Oh, see, hey, see, Rabbi, there go that woman stuff again that I be
I
talking
know,
about.
right? That's
Hey,
why
look
I
at
asked.
there it go. That's crazy. That's some more little. Hey, they better quit playing.
Yes, she was the first character to use the name. Okay, so that's what J does. When you open the book, you see Yahweh. That's why it's the J source. Okay, E in the E source, E indicates that Yahweh's name is not revealed until Moses' time. And before that, he is referred to as El, Elohim, sometimes Elohim. So that's E. Okay. The P source refers to the priestly source, pretty much, has priestly concerns. And then the D source is the book of Deuteronomy. Now, what we should know, which is important with what we are trying to do, our investigation, the last 3 sources on the list were written by Levites. J was not. It's important. The E source, the P source, the D source were written by Levites. The J source is not written by a Levite. The E, the P, the D, they contain a lot of religious laws and regulations reflecting the concerns of Levite priests. Meanwhile, J has more material on the pre-Moses period. We're looking at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It also shows an understanding and interest in the royal court rather than the priesthood. So J is not written by a Levite. EPD, they're written by Levites. What we should know about the Levites is that they had groups of Levites. You have the Mushites. You have the Aaronites. You have the Shilonites. You have the Zadokites, etc. This is why you would notice. And most of the time, these groups are fighting. They don't agree on certain things, as usual. The stories of the E, P, and D sources present a polemic between the different Levite priestly groups, reflecting their rivalries. So you would read a text where the Mushites, who actually support Moshe, or they fancy Moshe, or they favorite Moshe, they'll write something against the Aaronite priests. And the ones in Shiloh will be upset because Jeroboam II has given their spot to some people else. So now when we read in the EPD source, we have to find out which priest. Is it a Mushite priest? Is it an Aaronite priest? Is it a Shilonite priest? Is it a Zadokite priest? Etc. So these are the different priests that we have. These are the different groups that are writing the text that we call the priestly text, which will be the E source, the P source, and then the D source.
Rabbi.
Yes, sir.
So what's up with this? So you believe that one of these sources is also a woman though?
The J.
The J. So
Yes, because, yeah, go ahead.
so I'm thinking like is there, because there's instances where the text has the men looking weak, like when old girl when it took dude head off, you know what I'm talking about? And
Okay,
when the
yep,
men was to, you know what I'm saying, when Deborah had to basically take over because the men wasn't, you know what I'm saying, um
correct.
the men wanting to go back to Egypt because the flesh parts, like when you think about it and observe, there are instances where the men, you know what I'm saying, and the women are heroes, you know what I'm saying.
Correct, yes. It does have, J does have um, women interests, I would say. Um, it does. It does. So I cannot prove emphatically that was written by a woman, but the reasons why I say that it may probably have been written um, in the court of one of the kings, and by an educated woman, maybe Bathsheba. After pulling one off on David, maybe she wrote it. I doubt it though. Um, but yes, it has women concerns. That's the J. Let's see. So these are sources. So when we read in the text, when we get there, I'll let you know which priest is writing. Um, but they are always there was tension between these groups of priests, as usual. It's normal. So now I'll give you an example. In the Levite source E, like I was telling Madam Pamela, Moses discovers the name of God at a bush on the mountain of God during their first meeting. Meanwhile, according to the Levite priestly source P, Moses is told the name of God in Egypt. So E tells us in Exodus 3, and God said further to Moshe, so shall you say to the children of Israel, Yahweh, God of your forefathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is how I should be mentioned in every generation. So the E source here is telling us that Yahweh is introduced to Moshe at the burning bush. When we come to the P source, Exodus 6, it tells us that the name is actually mentioned in Egypt. And Yahweh said to Moshe, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a mighty hand he will send them out, and with a mighty hand he will drive them out of his land. This is when he had gone the first time and Pharaoh had not paid him any attention. God spoke to Moshe and he said to him, I am Yahweh. So here, this is where the name is revealed to according to the P source, but the P source is so late. The P source has other concerns that it's trying to address. You know. And then you have one source put in the golden calf, making Aaron responsible for the golden calf. It was one is the Mushite. It was been written by the Mushite priests, those who favor Moshe. So you see that rivalry in the text between these Levites. They had their issues too. No, Madam Pamela, I hope I've brought some clarity to the priests. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely did. Can you hear me, Rabbi?
Yes, I can.
So I'm just like sitting here saying, now I understand better the rivalry with the Aaronites um, and the bulls. And we know it was political. We know that there was some shenanigans going on. But now
Correct.
that I'm seeing all the names of the priests just lined up on the screen like that, it gives me better clarity as to who was pushing what envelope and who was pushing what story and when they were, well, narrative, and when they were pushing that narrative and why they were doing it. So there's I have a better understanding of um, how to go forward when I'm reading this text again. So I keep going back and rereading it, and each time I learn something from you, I try to apply it to what I've read in the past to better understand it. So there is a question that I have, right? And it has to do with the priestly source. Well, I don't want to say the priestly source. I want to say one of the group of the priestly source, right? So we know the Shashu. So what's the tension between all the sources that you just listed? Did the Shashu give birth to all of those different sources, or are we saying the South came up with their own? Israel had a bunch and the South had their own. Like the Aaronites, I would believe, would be in the South, right? That would be a Southern push, right? And I look at the Shiloh, they would be like more of a Northern set of priests. And I'm just trying to base
Correct.
it on geography.
Correct.
Okay,
So
so
Aaron will be
the
south.
zodiac,
They will be south as well for the Zadok.
oh yeah, David,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
Okay. And so they're not necessarily, and so let me just condense this. So when Israel collapses, we no longer have that set of priests that necessarily support the Mosaic story and the Shiloh story. They're out of the scene. So we're just pulling from history what they had to say about it, because the South is now dominating, correct?
Correct. So beautiful, beautiful. Now this is all going to come together. Beautiful question and submission. When the Shasu comes in, there are already temples there. So you already have people who are serving as priests in these temples. So the Shasu will come and they will go to Shiloh. No. But they are not so many to be able to manage everything. So you would have the priests that were in Shiloh learning how to worship or how to um what you call it, take care of this deity Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. And then you did have one too at Bethel, so You would have representatives of the Levites or the group that they would train to also take care of this deity. When the deity comes into the south, yes, it would go into the temples that they already have. And then you have a priestly group that is taking care of this deity. The north falls, and even when they entered the north, you had tensions between the two, should I call them sects? You have the Bethel one, you have the Shiloh, and now the ark is moved from Shiloh and brought somewhere else. Shiloh is destroyed, so you have all this uh, um, rivalries going on. So the north is lost. The Mushite priests are no longer that important. The Shilonite priests are no longer that important. They have their grievances. They wrote stuff. Now you have the Aaronite, and then you have the Zadokite. Um, and they are going at it as well. But then who wins the day? Which of the two groups win the day? You have to find out which group Ezra comes from, because Ezra is the next lawgiver. Who can guess which Levitical priest group he comes from?
Is it the Aaronites?
Yes, that's why they won the day, because
Yeah,
Ezra is the
yeah.
son of Aaron, coming from Phinehas.
Hey, Rabbi.
Ezekiel, Jeremiah, they're coming from the same line.
Ah, there we go with that Jeremiah. Okay, very
And
good, very
and
good.
they are the priests that were where were they? In Egypt.
In Egypt. Oh my God. This is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, because didn't Jeremiah fight against the people that went to
Yep.
Egypt? That's what Jeremiah 42 is about.
Yes,
Wow, I didn't even catch
Jason,
that.
how cool.
Okay,
This is
okay.
amazing.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes, sir.
Man, the conscious community. Don't go see them. Don't. Just leave them alone. You know what I'm saying? Because we doing our thing. We need help on another side, right? Here in the Israelite community, in the Hebrew Israelite community, you know what I'm saying? And they would hate for all of these historical ties to Egypt to just be out here in their face like that. You know what I'm saying? But oh my gosh.
So if you're a Judahite, then you're following the Aaron, well, I'm going to say the Aaronites, because that's how it's in my mind. That's what you're practicing, that branch of it. Um, and this clears it up for me in another way. And I hope it makes sense to other people. We have all these denominations, right? And I'm looking
Right.
at the screen and I'm just seeing different, it's popping out. It's just different denominations. People
True.
believed in doing things one set of ways, and another person believe, and whoever wins the day for that day, because we all know that something else is coming, right? Nothing is stagnant.
Correct.
It's going to change again. It truly is. But this just gives us a clearer picture of how these denominations get started, and why they get started, and whose agenda is truly being pushed. So thank you.
You're
And
very
it
welcome.
makes a lot of sense because in the ancient world, the text could change. They were
Yep.
always adding to the text
Yep.
and bringing in their new understanding. Ezra and Nehemiah is a great representation of that because they added extra rules to the Sabbath. They added different
Yeah.
ways of how you are supposed to celebrate the Passover and stuff like that. So most people look at it like, oh, that's bad, but it's really not bad. You can't, the stuff that worked in 1960 doesn't work in 2022. We have to do different things, right? And that's the same thing with them too. Like they knew that you had to grow and the text had to evolve with you. and they didn't have a problem with that. It's just we have a problem with that, because when you get to the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are many other books that the Hebrew people were using as law, like not, but just besides the Torah, these books were in massive, were like rewritings, because they were using them, and they're not even in our biblical text, so they kind of like grew with the material, and it's just us who think that it's not supposed to happen that way.
Right.
It ain't, Jason. We only supposed to use this one book, the King James version, and the Blue Letter Bible, and you better not go against prophecy. That's what you better not do. You just and you go with the text. That's all we need. That's all we need, Jason. You better quit with all this blaspheming, brother.
Yeah. So yes, we see the priestly groups and their tensions and who won the day. One of the groups, when we get there, one of the groups favored the Babylonians. One of the groups did not. But at the end of the day, it was Aaron's group won the day, and they had a new lawgiver that was Ezra. I always say that there are two people who gave laws: Moshe, that's the Mushite group, and then the Aaronite group, which Ezra belongs to. So, no, we're seeing, or if I hope you're seeing my stance, where I'm coming from, why I'm coming from that angle, why I hold to the idea that it's only the Levites that were in Egypt. You know. And then when we go back to the Song of Miriam, we see that Yahweh is used about 9 times. No, his name plays a role in the song. El is never mentioned. It's always Yahweh, and he shows up 9 times in the text. So, what does that mean? Well, the arm, which is the people, the group, or the army, that it means army as well, who left Egypt, were associated with the worship of Yahweh. The Song of the Sea mentions his name 9 times. In contrast, the people living in Israel worshipped El. That's why they're called Israel, not Israyahu. No. When the Levites arrived, bringing with them their belief in Yahweh, he was embraced by the Israelites and thus entered into the country. This is how they came in contact with Yahweh. And then what happens then? Now, the Levites are the ones who are to teach them. They are the scribes. They are the ones who can write. They are the ones who are educated because they are coming from Egypt, which tells us that they are coming from a very aristocratic group. The story of Joseph would come to mind here. We'll touch that later. You know. So they are writing, and what did they do? Now, a historical event that they alone witnessed became a national event where everybody felt like they witnessed it. That is why they said in the Exodus narrative, when your child asks you, "What is this?" you shall tell them this. We were in Egypt, blah, blah, blah. Was all the people in Egypt? No. Only a group of people left Egypt. A handful of people. They were so small they could not have left any traces for archaeologists to find. Somebody massaged the numbers and made it about 2 million. We'll find out who that is. His concerns that made him do that. So this is the Exodus according to the text of what really happened. The next class, whenever we decide to have it, we're going to look at the Levites' knowledge of Egyptian customs, Egyptian cultures. Because if they are the ones teaching, it means that they will be teaching what they know. We're going to compare the tabernacle and the battle tent of Ramses. Let's see if they have similarities.
Oh my gosh, why would you
You will
do
be
that, Rabbi?
you will be surprised.
Rabbi, I just, oh my gosh. Wow. Wow. Okay.